In episode 2, the big story post-wedding day is what Parliament is calling it. They're calling it the Great Experiment, marrying a white guy to a black woman. But because the crown put their neck out to make sure that this thing went through, it's very important that it is successful. But in order to make sure it is a success, they need to make sure that the couple consummated their relationship or not. It's all the princess and her group of advisors can discuss, whether or not the king and the queen did the damn thing. You've got a guy like Lord Bute who has the voice of Parliament, and he's pretty concerned, the fact that they don't know. But then you've got the princess reassuring everybody that she's convinced her son was able to do the deed. And one of the reasons it's such a big deal whether or not the two had sex is because the relationship isn't legitimate until the two are trying to have babies. So the princess and her advisors need to figure out whether or not the couple hooked up. And of course, they didn't. The queen is bored out of her mind. She wakes up and asks Brimsley, "What do I have on the schedule?" But he tells her, "Well, nothing. It's your honeymoon." And at first, it's okay. I mean, she is in this beautiful house surrounded by servants who are there to be at her beck and call. But after a few days, she is bored senseless. So much so that she tells Brimsley, "Get the carriage ready. I'm going to Kew," which is pretty unheard of. Queens don't just drop by. They kind of announce their presence. But Charlotte doesn't play those kind of games. So it's a surprise visit. It's one that the king and Reynolds don't really have a lot of time to prepare for. But when she does arrive, Reynolds informs her that the king is in the observatory. And Charlotte has never seen an observatory before. So the king is excited to show her one because one of his passions is astronomy. But Charlotte's actually insulted. She figured that the king would rather spend time in a brothel. And while that is bad, at least it's understandable. But this, the fact that the king was blowing her off to be with planets millions of miles away, she doesn't really know how to take that. And she's not taking it well. Just like the other night, the king can't quite understand what her gripe is. And she yells at him, "George, you're telling me I'm the queen and I can do whatever I want, but I can't. I can't go to the modiste. I can't go out. I can't make friends. I know one person in this country, and it's you. And you would rather hang out with the stars than hang out with me." And George doesn't know what to say to that. And the fact that he stays quiet infuriates the queen even more, so that she ends up leaving. When she arrives back at her carriage, Brimsley and Reynolds were just coming back outside. They were inside because if the king and queen aren't going to hook up, Brimsley and Reynolds will hook up. The next day, though, Brimsley and Reynolds are called upon by the princess because she feels like if anybody would know whether the king and the queen consummated their relationship, it would be their right-hand men. But Reynolds and Brimsley don't really divulge anything. They say all the right things, like the king and the queen are enjoying their honeymoon, they're getting along swimmingly, but they don't really answer the princess's questions because they just don't want to betray the trust. Of course, they know that the couple didn't consummate their relationship, but how do you tell the princess that? So they decide not to. But they do know that it's important that the couple finally start to, do adult stuff. And Brimsley kind of pushes it on Reynolds because, after all, it is the king who seems to be the one not interested. Reynolds doesn't know how exactly he's going to do that, and Brimsley suggests maybe you have the king make a gesture. So, at the behest of Reynolds, the king does that. He sends a note over that tells Charlotte, "I never want you to feel alone." And then he gifts her a Pomeranian. It's an adorable dog, but she hates it. She calls it a deformed bunny. Fast forward a week, and the loneliness, even with the Pomeranian, is getting to Charlotte. She tells Brimsley, "I'm going to meet with my ladies in waiting." But he says, that's really unwise of you to do. To meet with all of your ladies in waiting at once, it's pretty unheard of. Now, if you were to meet with, say, one lady in waiting, a discreet lady in waiting, I think that would be okay. And what he means is somebody who can keep their mouth shut, because they have to keep this hush-hush. The queen isn't supposed to have any visitors during her honeymoon. Brimsley suggests that she invite over Lady Danbury. And Lady Danbury is more than happy to get an invite to go anywhere. Because even though they have the new fancy title of Lord and Lady, nothing has changed for them. Her husband is not invited in the exclusive clubs. He's not invited out to the hunts. He's basically left at home. And if he's left at home, his pastime is to have sex with his wife, who definitely doesn't want to do that. So Lady Danbury's kind of miserable. She's just thrilled to get out of the house for whatever reason. When she does go over to the palace to have some tea, there is a feeling out process. After all, these two women don't really know each other. But when they finally get some alone time, Lady Danbury's honest with the queen and tells her, "You're a terrible liar. I mean, when you told me that you enjoyed the king's company, I could tell that you were lying. So you might want to fix that. But hey, don't beat yourself up too much. Your wedding night doesn't have to be perfect. My wedding night was horrible. My husband's way older than me, and it just wasn't enjoyable at all. It was pretty miserable." And that's when the queen opens up about just how miserable her wedding night was for her, about how George left her there all alone. And that begs the question from Lady Danbury, well, did you guys consummate the relationship? And she realizes that they didn't. Danbury then stresses the importance of doing so. She reminds Charlotte that it wasn't too long ago queens were killed for not having enough babies. And now you've got a situation where you're not having sex with the king. It's not a good look, especially considering your relationship isn't valid until you do so. Then she realizes, though, that the queen is only 17 years old, and she probably has no idea what to expect. So Danbury grabs some paper and pencils and starts drawing out sex positions, telling Charlotte what she can expect when they finally get down to it. Charlotte seems a little hesitant to do this because she doesn't like George, and Danbury isn't doing a good job selling the benefits of sex. So when she shows hesitation, Danbury tells her, "You have to do this. You are the first of your kind." And she hints at the importance of doing so for people that look like them. Now, even though this meeting was supposed to be discreet, people talk. Danbury was seen by servants, servants talked to other servants, and word got to the princess that Lady Danbury had a private meeting with Charlotte. The princess needs some eyes and ears in that castle. She needs to know what is going on. And it certainly seems like Charlotte is taking a liking to Lady Danbury. So the very next day, the princess calls to have tea with Lady Danbury. And she tells her, "I need to know what is going on in there." And Lady Danbury explains that she is more than willing to tell the princess whatever she wants, but she wants something in return. First thing is, the title of Lord and Lady usually comes with property they haven't gotten, so they're going to want that. But more than anything, she wants her husband to be respected. She wants her husband to be able to get into those exclusive clubs and to go on hunts. And she doesn't really want this for her husband, she just wants him off of her. It's a big ask, but then again, the princess does want this information really badly, so she accepts. And a couple days later, the Danburys move into their palatial new house. But Danbury isn't actually planning on telling the princess any information. She's going to tell her a bunch of generic stuff and not betray what Charlotte tells her in private. Now, as for Charlotte, that night, she actually has a dinner guest. It's King George. He thought she would be thrilled to see him, but she's not. She's actually infuriated. She starts walking out of the room, and he stops her and says, "No, Charlotte, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how difficult this was for you, but let me show you where I've been." And he takes her to the observatory. He shows her a part of his passion, his obsession, really, and she seems to be into it. He then kisses her, apologizes once again, and informs her that he will be moving in to the house where she is. And the first night that they sleep under the same roof, they both lose their virginity to each other. The next morning, though, when the queen wakes up, she's looking all over for George, and Brimsley tells her, "Well, I think he has a visitor." And he does. His mother came. Charlotte overhears the conversation because it gets pretty contentious. The queen came because she wanted to know if the two had hooked up or not. And the king yells at his mother, "You told me to wed. I did. You told me to charm her, to make it easier for the crown. I did my best. You told me not to let her know me because I must protect the secrets of the crown. I've done that as well. Then you told me to bed her. I have done so. I realize the pressure of being king. Nobody realizes it more than me." And while the king didn't mean to make Charlotte feel bad because he didn't even know she overheard this, it does. And makes her feel like everything that happened the previous night was fake. Once the princess leaves, though, the king ends up having a little bit of a fit. He collapses in a chair. His arm is shaking. Reynolds asks him, "Should I go get the doctor?" And the king says, "Yes." But Charlotte, and Reynolds cuts him off and says, "Sir, she'll never know." Now, the modern day queen, she is having trouble because none of her kids want to get married. She needs tips. She calls Lady Bridgerton and Lady Danbury to a meeting, and more so, she wanted to talk to Bridgerton. She asked Lady Bridgerton, "You have all these kids, and they all wanted to get married. How did you do it?" And Lady Bridgerton says, well, it doesn't hurt if it's for love. That's the ultimate motivation. It does spark a little bit of debate between Lady Bridgerton and Lady Danbury. After all, the two women did marry for different reasons. Lady Bridgerton marrying for love, and Lady Danbury, well, she hated her husband, so she looks at marriage as nothing more than a duty. But between this conversation, somehow the queen decides, okay, I will put a list together of eligible women who my son can marry, and they can worry about the love later. Because this woman is hell-bent on having an heir to the throne. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.